welcome back to the Just a Nerd podcast. And today we are taking a trip down memory lane where we're going to be looking at the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, such as Day of the Doctor, Night of the Doctor, and so many amazing things that happened during that 50th anniversary year. But today I have brought two awesome people, two amazing friends on this journey with me to look back at the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who. And if you would both like to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I am one half of an awful lot of running. The hostess with the mostess, let's call myself. I'm like my hostess, my host. I also run the Doctor Who community show now. After beating our host live on the stage at MCM Comic Con. This could have been you. This could have been your burden to carry, but no, it's mine.
Parallel universe.
Yeah, I'm Jack Alexander. Yeah, and yeah, that's me.
There we go. Introduction done. And over to you.
Oh, hello. My name is Robin Fole. I am the second half to An Awful Lot of Running, a Doctor Who podcast. Kicking and screaming along the way as Jack here's my mad doctor, and I'm his unsuspecting companion on our journey. I also host, or run rather, Dimensions and Daleks, our Doctor Who Dungeons and Dragons spin-off series, which is a lot of fun as well.
Oh, great. Okay, that sounds absolutely fantastic. Well, as I said originally as well, it's an absolute honor to have you both here to talk about what is seen by many as a fantastic Doctor Who episode, a fantastic celebration of the show's 50-year history. But let's take a flashback to 2013. Now, obviously, there was a lot of anticipation when this episode was airing because we knew that Matt Smith's time on Doctor Who was coming to a close, but we also had a lot of things being released as part of this milestone year. So let's do a little bit of a throwback. Where were you both when you watched this episode? Were you with family, on your own, or were you in cinemas? Because this was also, I think this was the first Doctor Who episode that was broadcast in cinema and in 3D.
Yeah. I'd finished university a few months earlier, so I was a graduate at this point, but was spending a year with my wife, then girlfriend, spending a year at home at my parents' house, and they were away for the weekend or something, and it's all I was thinking about. It was all I was thinking about, and I was very, particular about it. And I'm going to refer to my girlfriend, even though she's now my wife. She was saying, like, "Are you sure you don't want to go sit in the cinema? Are you sure I don't?" I was like, no, I have to. It's new Doctor Who. I have to be sat on the sofa. I have to do it this way. If I'm in the cinema, people are just going to annoy me. I was like, this is not just any episode, it's the 50th anniversary. By that point I'd grown up on stories like the 3 Doctors and the 5 Doctors, so I was very much expecting a spectacle for this. And it was already, you say earlier in the year we'd had the confirmation that Matt was leaving the show, but from all the little snippets, like from the confirmation that the Zygons were going to be in the episode, to David Tennant coming back, who was my doctor, by the way, at the time. I was so hyped and excited to see that multi-doctor story, which I think we're in a very different point now in terms of the fandom, where I think that people, they like it, but there's not the same sort of hype behind it now, because it's almost been, certainly in certain years with things like Big Finish, it's been overdone, I think, for some people. So it's, at the time though, it was a lot of people's favorite Doctor meeting the current Doctor, and then we didn't even really know, name of the Doctor ends with the reveal of John Hurt as the Doctor, and everyone's sort of going, what?
Yeah,
and we didn't really know what the context of that was going to be until we saw this. So yes,
absolutely. Yeah, I completely forgot up until you mentioned, Jack, about that huge cliffhanger from Name of the Doctor, because that was the first time that we actually got like a look at the Doctor's past. Because we had heard stuff about the Time War, but it was just assumed that Paul McGann's Doctor was fighting in the Time War. So it's such a huge twist as well, and to get a star like John Hurt was fantastic.
Phenomenal. Yeah, exactly. I mean, back when I was watching Doctor Who, I wasn't as familiar with John Hurt's work, but my
Yeah,
parents were. So when he was revealed, that to them was like a big, big deal. And it's in years afterwards when you look back on his filmography and you just appreciate it far more. And you're like, bloody hell, we got the amazing John Hurt to
yeah,
be a doctor.
Mm,
And he, like every other doctor we've ever had, sells it. The guy does
yeah,
not
yeah.
phone it in. He owns it, and he is such a formidable and such a unique doctor. Like, God, I need to listen to his Big Finish stuff because I've just heard great
yes,
stuff.
They are genuinely what sort of got me into Big Finish. I could cut my teeth on that stuff because I was like, oh, I really enjoyed this. We're probably not going to see him back on TV anytime soon. And
Mm.
it's not just anyone playing the Doctor; it's Sir John Hurt, who,
yeah,
Mm.
in my opinion, is probably one of the greatest living actors. Well, one of the greatest. Obviously, he's not living now. But obviously, one of the greatest actors who's ever lived, in my opinion. Just
yeah,
from his
100%.
body of work. From Alien from 1984 to so many different things. I just really connected with every performance that I ever saw from him. Things like I think he's even in. Is it The Secret of Nim? He has a voice in that as well.
Yes.
Which is
Yes, he is.
he has that iconic voice, the raspy voice. Which I'm not even going to try to do it because Jonathan Carly does it so well. I don't want to show him up. So, but it's that gravelly. Just it's a voice that I don't think you'd think the Doctor would have,
yeah,
which makes it so perfect for this. What was a hidden, unspoken incarnation, which whether it came about through, um, conversations with Chris Eccleston falling through or other things like that, I actually think it really works for the
yeah.
story to have this version of the Doctor that doesn't want to call themselves the Doctor.
Yeah. From what I recall, I think, yeah, it was originally planned that Christopher Eccleston was due to return. He had several meetings with Stephen Moffat, but unfortunately, he decided not to come back. And I think before this was written, the only person that was contracted to appear in the 50th anniversary special was Jenna Coleman. So we could have had
Wow.
in an alternate mad universe, we could have just had Jenna Coleman going through, I think it was various timelines, trying to find the Doctor until we get the reveal of what would have been the next Doctor, which would have been interesting. I think it was, well, Moffat had like a rough idea that there would have been like guest stars that would play different alternate Doctors, which sounds crazy in itself.
Well,
Mm.
it sounds crazy at the time, but now you look at it and you look at certain, decisions around stunt casting, and you think, oh, maybe
Yeah,
he would have been onto something there.
yeah,
It's
maybe,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny you should say that as well, Jack, because we'll get there a bit later on, but there's certain lines in this episode that can now be completely reinterpreted, especially with current events and the like. And you're like, oh, it's obviously they couldn't foreshadow events that would happen 13 years later or however long it's been since this aired, 2013, which is a crazy amount of time.
yeah.
But it's just really fascinating to sort of then pick up on lines and be like, hang on a minute, we can reinterpret that now. But we'll,
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's the thing because, I mean, a lot of the things that can be recontextualized now with certain pieces of dialogue like that probably wasn't the intention at the time, but because
No.
Doctor Who being the show that it is, I mean, you can always cheekily say like, "Oh, there you go." I guess that covers that ground somewhat, but yeah, well, I mean, that's really interesting getting to hear about where Jack was at the time and also being determined to watch it on TV. But Robin, where were you when you watched the episode?
Oh God, where was I? So I was still watching this with family. This was our TV night, every
Yeah,
single Saturday we would sit down. If it wasn't Doctor Who, we'd find some other series to watch, whether that be Merlin, Robin Hood, Life on Mars. I think there was a time as well where we even watched ITV's attempt of Doctor Who being oh shoot, what
Revival,
was it?
yeah. Primeval, yeah?
Primeval. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
that was good.
That was
There
fun.
moments, there were
Yeah.
moments of Primeval that I really enjoyed, you know?
That never got a conclusion, but
Yeah.
no, but we'd always have our kind of series that we'd watch, and it was really, really interesting being a part of the 50th anniversary to build up because you knew something was in the works, and I wasn't looking at anything online, so I avoided spoilers. I wasn't getting any of the magazines or anything. So the John Hurt reveal was, whoa, okay, like even though I'm not familiar with his work, my parents instantly were, and that's what got me excited. And then I think through his introduction, I then slowly started to look back at his filmography and go, wait, no, of course I know him. Not only was he Secret of Nim and Alien that I watched at 9, 10 years old on my holiday in France, which is far too young to be
That's gotta be a
subjected to
horrifying
that.
experience.
Subjected to the doctors getting his chest burst, but hey, that's a fan edit if I can imagine it. But it was also Aragorn in the animated Lord of the Rings movie, which is
Ooh.
such a interesting, different performance. But I'm getting a bit of ahead of myself there. I just remembered just being hyped to see my favorite Doctor, David Tennant, coming back to the
Yeah.
frame to be joined by Matt Smith, to have all these other fun surprises because I still was very unfamiliar with a lot of classic Doctor Who stories. So when the episode finally did come out and got like these little snippets of things and little references, even though some of them was sort of brand new to me, you could not escape that excitement. You could not escape that draw where I haven't seen this since it first aired, but even I've gone on with our own podcast to say that it is like my favorite story. And it's like I've got an awful memory, but my God, did this still hold a place in me? I avoided actually all mentions of Billy Piper coming back. So
Oh,
yeah, no, I know, right? So when she came on the screen the first time, we were all like, "Oh, it's Billy Piper."
that's
We were all
nice.
really, really, really ecstatic about that. It was just such a, yeah, I think even for people who were kind of starting to like sort of go away from Doctor Who, where the hype was sort of coming down a little bit, which is,
Yeah.
understandable when a series goes on for a long time. I think you could still sense that in a lot of classrooms, in a lot of
Yeah.
general discussions, news articles, that this was a big deal. 50th
Yeah.
anniversary of the longest one in sci-fi TV series, and bring back all these names. What's not to
Yeah.
love?
Yeah, definitely. And as well, with I can certainly relate to having that little sense of fatigue with Doctor Who as well at the time, because I remember towards the latter part of Series 6 and the first part of Series 7. I mean, my opinion has changed a bit now, but I was feeling a little bit worn out with Doctor Who at the time.
Mm.
Just because I felt like the plots were just getting like too complicated and too timey-wimey for my little brain then. But I remember sitting down and watching Doctor Who with my family. I think that was the first time I'd sat down with them since, I would probably say, like the first part of Series 6, and it was such a magical experience. And I still remember it as well, cheering when all the various TARDISes appeared during the Sailing
Yeah.
Gallifrey
Oh
sequence,
yeah.
which just standing ovation for that sequence just on its own.
Oh yeah. And I forgot by this point we'd had Doctor Who. Was it the reveal little TV show that they did, which they just basically, they basically spun the wheels for 30 minutes. They went, "Oh, here's Peter Capaldi,
Yeah,
Peter Capaldi's the 12th Doctor." I forgot we knew that by this point because that moment with
yeah,
the "No, sir, all 13," and we see the hand go and the
yeah,
eyebrows.
yeah.
That still hits really hard now.
Iconic, yeah, certainly is iconic. But before we dive into the TV stuff that we got during that year, which, whoa, we got a lot, but there was obviously a fair bit of merch that was released across various forms, whether it be toys or postage stamps, which was very interesting. But is there anything that stands out to you that was released during that year that you thought was like really good for merchandise, or is there anything that you bought or wish that you got?
I definitely wish that I'd got. Sorry, Robin. We do this on our podcast all the time. We jump over each other. Like, no, I want to answer this. Go on, you go, buddy. You go.
You know what? I probably wasn't looking as deeply into the merchandise as some of the mega fans and the like, but there were certainly things that kept on coming up, kept on appearing to the point that I kept on seeing this one particular Dalek everywhere I went. The one with the great big Union Jack on it.
Oh, yeah.
And all me and my friends could think of. And in fact, it was my dad, I think, that made this joke when we saw it. And it was like, is that the sixth member of Spice Girls that we've just never seen before? Like Deadly Spice or whatever you want to call it. It's just the Union Jack was very much synonymous with something that a Spice Girl would wear. And it's like, okay, sure, that's... The Pepper Pot is now a Spice Girl. Why not? But all jokes aside, it was very surreal to.
It was a choice, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's certainly a choice taking the icon of space fascism and putting a Union flag on it. Like,
Hang on, are we the baddies?
Yeah, I still remember seeing it at the time, and I never bothered picking it up. But I thought, it's an interesting one. I mean, we've had stone Daleks, we've had the Ironside Daleks, so the Daleks occasionally, clearly like spicing up their life, but but yeah, no, it was a bit of an interesting one. For merch that I wish that I picked up, and I didn't realize that this was under Toys R Us, but what they did for the 50th anniversary was that they did a set with all of the Doctors. But well, I say all of the Doctors. It was like one set for each Doctor, but it was a Doctor and their respective Dalek design. So you had, like, for example, Matt Smith, and then I think it was the blue Dalek from the new Paradigm. Which I thought was really cool. I completely forgot which name the blue one got, but yeah, it was like a really cool set, and it was the metallic sort of look that they got in Asylum of the Daleks, which I thought looked absolutely fantastic, and I wish I picked that up. But yeah, what about you, Jack? Is there anything you like to talk about?
I mean, in terms of ones that I really wish I picked up, and it goes for a lot of them. They used to have those they call them universal remotes, which were like, they had a 10th Doctor one. And they had the 11th Doctor one as well. It was like a metallic version of the screwdriver. Basically, looked like a working prop. Basically,
yeah.
As much as a remote control can look like a prop. So I really wish I picked that up. I do remember them being about 200 quid at a time, and I just like finished university, and I didn't have 200 quid to my name, so I couldn't exactly do that. So that was a cool one. I know they did have various versions of like an 11th Doctor like figure set, whether it be like, I think it had like those little micro figures, which is like the off-brand version of Lego. They had for a bit. I don't know if it was actually the 50th or not, but I've got a character options. I'm going to open up now. 11 Doctors here. A lot of the molds and a lot of the figure quality has improved since this time, but this has never been opened. This is gathering dust, but I just can't. As much as I'm get them out of the box sort of guy, I just can't bring myself to open this one.
Yeah,
it's just it's really cool, And I think Big Finish had Light at the End, which was their 50th anniversary celebration for Doctor Who, which was one of my first Big Finishes that I listened to. Yeah. And then apart from that, I really enjoyed. They did like a selection of books like from each Doctor, which they re-released under the 50th there, which really was really cool. So they had like they had some from like the BBC book range of Doctor Who, as opposed to the Virgin New Adventures or any of those missing Doctor ones. They re-released a bunch of those ones and a couple of the New Adventure ones with the new series Doctors, and they were just great. I mean, they gave them a new cover, they reworked some of them as well, which was really, really, the gorgeous covers, and
Yeah.
it's that's really cool. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Again, there's so much variety when it comes to the merch that was released during this time period. Again, we had postage stamps, we had collector's coins as well. There was postcards. Again, the sonic screwdriver remote as well. And I always remember as well, there was those big books that were released. I think, what was it called? The Vault or something? Which was like,
the
it
Vault.
was like
Beautiful compendium, yeah.
Well over 200 pages, and it was very well detailed, documented of Doctor Who's production. I remember just reading that and just being blown away by some of the stuff that they had in there, because it goes into a nice bit of detail of the show's 50-year history, which, especially for the earlier stuff as well, is really, really interesting to read.
It really is, and I think a lot of us, certainly when the show was, when we first started becoming fans of the show, those sort of big tomes of Doctor Who books. Like I remember, I think it was like Doctor Who: The Origin, or I can't remember what it was that came out around series 1, and it literally finishes like with a press photo of David Tennant, like not even in costume, like just because it's sort of like, oh, we need to do this here, and it's sort of how a lot of us sort of learned a lot about like classic Who and some of the the anecdotes and thingamabobs, in between them, which we wouldn't necessarily know now unless we had those sort of sources to look at now. I mean, obviously, everything's now on the internet, but at the time, those books were what we had and what we loved, and a lot of them are still great, and they're still coming out with different ones, each year's, which are just brilliant compendiums, just full of just amazing information. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Again, like, I feel like Doctor Who merch, there is always something for everyone as well, whether that be the readers or the figurine collectors or the more obscure merch. I mean, wasn't it a few years ago there was this was actually used as part of the costume, but wasn't there like part of the Absorbaloff costume that was being marketed on or was being sold off on eBay? I think.
What?
That's crazy. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Like they had that big auction last year, didn't they, of stuff? I wouldn't be surprised if someone had cut up Peter Kay and sold them on the internet.
But it's like, like when it comes to merch, like fans will go crazy for stuff like that. And I think Doctor Who, whether it's comics, games, TV, obviously the occasional film as well, there is always a way for Doctor Who to exist in a medium, which I think is fantastic. But speaking of different mediums with Doctor Who, before we get into Day of the Doctor, let's talk about the 2 minisodes that we got during this year, because there was 2, I believe. The Last Day and Night of the Doctor. But before we get onto Night of the Doctor, not to be confused with Name of the Doctor or any other of the Doctors, The Last Day. Now, what do you recall from watching this minisode, and how did it make you feel whilst watching it? Did it get you excited for the for the big milestone episode, or?
So I've got a confession to make.
Oh, okay.
I had never seen either of these 2 minisodes back when they were first available.
Oh, okay.
So when I was doing my research for this episode, when Jack was like, "Oh yeah, don't forget to watch these 2 minisodes," I was like, "2 minisodes? What?" So I immediately just looked them up, and I was like, "Ooh, this is like a time capsule, a lost Doctor Who episode or 2 that I could just watch," and being able to see like a full 5 minutes of Paul McGann just being his amazing Paul McGann was just like, yes. Because I love him in Big Finish, and the fact he mentions Charlie in the West, it's like, yes, vindication. I love it. But yeah, it was so surreal to discover this, to watch those, and then go on to watching this episode of Doctor Who that I'd not watched since 2013, and just remembering not only how much I loved it, but also just picking up new things through hindsight, through fresh eyes, and being like, oh, this still ages brilliantly, just really good times.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. So, obviously, the Last Day follows the Time Lords during the final days of the war. Jack, obviously we've heard at this point murmurings of the Time War and what actually happened, but did this minisode get you excited for the events that were to come?
It did. Just yeah, like the Time War in itself. By this point, what 8 years into the revival,
Yeah,
felt so hyped up. We treaded into it here and there. We'd
yeah,
never really properly seen it. Like it's only after this Big Finish, for example, got the right to go into the Time War. It was so sort of it was time locked in the real
yeah,
world, just like the real event. So it was no matter what it's I think it's still got a sort of sense of legend or mythology behind it, where people are sort of like, oh, it's the Time War. It opens up the realm of possibility in terms of the Doctor Who stories that you can tell within it, which I think are really cool because you say the word Time War, you instantly think, well, stuff's going to get trippy, stuff is going to start getting weird, which is what I really love about this stories we have for the Time War now. But at the time, like you say, this was our sort of our first look at it, and it's very sort of it's very grounded in this. We're
yeah,
seeing it from the perspective of just a couple of like Time Lord guards, aren't we?
yeah,
Like working in the
Mm.
Castellian there, and what have you, looking up. I remember, like the idea of like it's going to hit the sky trench or something. Like they say, oh, it's a lone Dalek coming down, and then all hell breaks loose, and it's what leads us into the Siege of Arcadia, which is very much featured in the episode. So I remember being like, oh wow, yeah, ooh, this is cool, and then not really knowing how it would sort of come into the actual episode itself. And I think they do it in a really good way, where it's sort of just it's the one Time Lord actor we see in that appears towards the beginning, is saved by the War Doctor,
yeah.
and yeah, I think it's nice. I think it's funny as well because it's of the two, it's the one you could skip and
Yeah.
Yeah.
just enjoy the episode. But I think it does add a bit of context to things, which is very nice. Yeah.
Very nice indeed. Yeah, yeah. So obviously we've spoken and we've gotten this one out of the way, but Night of the Doctor, the other minisode that released, did shock fans when it released. I think it released like a couple weeks before the main event had happened, and the teaser for this minisode before it aired that it would focus on either the 11th, the 10th, or as what it was referred to back then, the unknown incarnation of the Doctor. And whilst that wasn't entirely true, we saw the return of a much requested actor to the Whoniverse, Paul McGann. And we finally saw, after so bloody long, we saw him actually regenerate, but not into Christopher Eccleston. We got his regeneration into the War Doctor. Now, Robin, you've recently watched this for the first time,
Mm.
which I'm actually kind of envious, being able to see some, from your eyes, fresh Paul McGann content, I can imagine is thrilling. But what was it like seeing Paul McGann back as the Doctor?
Well, I did not expect to see any other Paul McGann like filmed content outside of the TV movie, which again I need to go back and rewatch that because that was one of my sort of other earlier sort of introductions to Doctor Who as well, which was wonderful. But to see him, even though it was just 5 minutes, just because I'm so used to him now on Big Finish and that silky voice of his, like, beautiful. But it's just put a face to it and to see him interact with people, to see him still be very much the Doctor, trying to help someone who doesn't want to be saved, someone who looks at them with such like disdain because of them being a Time Lord, being a cause of this war, and that very much put like an extra layer for John Hurt's Doctor, which I never kind of
Yeah.
had before. Like I got the sense of what he was going through, and I got the sense of what he had to do or thought that he does. But this definitely added a whole extra like layer to it, and it also just added like some more lore to the Time Lords themselves with these mysterious witches and this kind of witchcraft, which I love some magic in Doctor Who. I love some
No, that's the Sisterhood of Khan from the Fourth Doctor episode, The Brain of Morbius, you filthy casual. Dare
I'm
you?
sorry.
Oh, I did more.
I'm sorry, Jack, but you're meant to push up your glasses first and say, actually.
Actually, the family actually supposed to tell them the Brain of Morbius.
You know what? I've actually really enjoyed listening to what is pretty much your fresh perspective of seeing that in 2025. Nearly said 2024. No, we are in 2025. So yeah, seeing that is absolutely fantastic. Now, Jack, I'm guessing you watched this prior to the episode.
Oh yeah, I remember this because at the time I wasn't really on Twitter. Like, you know, I don't think Twitter was really like as big as it is sort of now. And I think I remember getting a notification on Facebook. Like that's how I got all my Doctor Who, like, you know, all my information was through the official Doctor Who Facebook account. So I remember it popping up there, be like, oh, it's a little mini episode, and sitting there on my phone, watching it in bed. My girlfriend at the time coming in, you know, and going, oh, I was like, oh, it's just this little mini soap before Doctor Who next week. I just want to watch it now. I remember I'm a doctor, though probably not the one you're expecting, and literally throwing my phone across the room just for being that, like, and I did it was a very similar experience to me watching Power of the Doctor when he shows up in that. I got up, I ran around the room going, it's Paul, 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 and then picking up my phone back up, you know, sort of swipe, you know, just sort of swiping the glass off it and just, you know, trying to have it there, fully smashed. Just enjoy that episode. My God, it's one of my favorite Doctor Who things just ever.
Yeah.
Just for not only to sort of have a moment more with Paul, to see his Doctor go and finally have that send off, to see him canonize a lot of Big Finish in that as well, which is, you know, really cool and what have you. But it also became sort of like one of those episodes or mini-sodes, one of those things I actually watched the most of, because at that time I had a little Samsung phone, and I remember downloading it on the Google Play Store and having that. And whenever I just had 5 minutes, so, I'll watch Night of the Doctor. Oh, okay, I'll watch Night of the Doctor. Sure, on the bus. Yeah, I guess I'll watch Night of the Doctor 5 times. So it was, you know, just because it just, I watched it today actually, just to. I didn't get to watch the whole episode again, but even though I've seen it so many times, I wanted to watch it again, but just didn't get around to it today. I felt that same hype watching it today, just going, yeah, really cool. And it's that, like, the costume, the way he looks is so fantastic. The dialogue, even though it's only like 7-8 minutes long, is just snappy and just fantastic. It works so well as what it is. And it felt like this beautiful little just extra treat. You know, we were already getting a full course, like beautiful full course, like dinner worthy of a king with Day of the Doctor. This was just a lovely little appetizer for us as well, which just was like, oh, if this is the appetizer, like, oh my God, the main thing's gonna be even amazing, you know? So it is just beautiful stuff. I'm really surprised you hadn't seen it before, Robin. I swear I've mentioned it before. And but then at the same time, I can imagine you just sort of going, nodding along, like,
yeah.
Oh, he's on another one. Okay, sure.
But we're like a married couple, you know. He talks about these things, and I just nod along. I'm just like, that's nice.
Yeah.
And then he'll make up an episode every now and again as well, and I'll go, Robin, that's never happened in Doctor Who before. He'll go, oh, I'm sure it has. And I'm like, no.
Well, yeah, Night of the Doctor was certainly a surprise because we saw Paul McGann return to the role for the first time on TV since the 1996 TV movie, and it finally brought closure to that incarnation of the Doctor as he passed on and became the War Doctor, which set up the events of Day of the Doctor. But there's one more pit stop before we get to Day of the Doctor, and that is An Adventure in Space and Time, which is a very interesting docudrama that goes through the early beginnings of Doctor Who and also leads to the end the ending of William Hartnell's time on the show. So, have you both seen this docudrama?
Yes.
And what were your thoughts on it?
I instantly fell in love with it when I first
Yeah.
watched it back then. I just think it is whether you're a Doctor Who fan or not. Obviously, if you're a Doctor Who fan, you're going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
If you're not, I think you're just going to have a really beautifully made piece of television, which I think is just. I think the story behind it is so lovingly crafted. I mean, Mark Gatiss wrote it, didn't he? And it is.
Yeah.
I think it's my favorite, and I think it's the best thing Mark Gatiss has ever done.
Yeah.
Personally, and there are so many just little touches in it as well, which are just like, wow, this is. I think you could almost watch it and be like, oh, I can understand why people love this show so much, even without being a fan yourself. You know, like I know my wife's enjoyed it when we've watched it together. Like we rewatched it the year of the 60th when they had the Shooty cut come out, and she was like, you know, really enjoying that as well. So it was, yeah, I think it's a love letter for fans, isn't it, of the show anyway, but just to sort of see the hidden story behind it, which you might not know. I certainly didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, and I think it's great to see, you know, people like Verity Lambert and Waris Hussein being very much pushed to the forefront of it as well. You know, you go into it, you assume it's just going to be William Hartnell's story.
Yeah.
And it's not just his. You see Sidney Newman around him as well. You see so many different, you know, sort of legendary figures of Doctor Who in the sort of the creation of it, and it's so wonderful. You know, David Bradley has a brilliant performance, which obviously has got him a lot of work post it as well, which is very good to see. You know, and then you know Jessica Raine as Verity Lambert is. You know, I always remember, and it's that quote which is very famous. You know, she talks about having. I hope it's all right if I say this, Jack. But it's, you know, she has. You know, she's piss and, you know, blood that's like piss and vinegar, which is like, oh, it's so cool. And Sacha Dhawan appearing in Doctor Who before being in Doctor Who in a way as well, you know, as Waris Hussein, just this beautiful performance. It's just really sort of understated as well. And just, you think, wow, it's, I think it should be studied in schools. Genuinely, I think it's that brilliant.
It is really good as well. Robin, how did you feel whilst watching this?
I pretty much on the same like note of Jack, and it's funny that you bring up the whole like it should be like studied. Not only would this make for like a fantastic like drama piece, like you know drama students doing this, but in terms of history as well, like Doctor Who ironically was made to first of all be like for history, for like younger audiences to learn something for like an educational standpoint. So for this being like, hey, here's the history about how this show got off the ground, how they had to fight tooth and nail, how they had to constantly fight this guy at the prop department to like just build us a set. Can you design the set for us? And he does it so haphazardly. He just throws it together. It's like, yeah, done. And then it became so iconic, and it's so simplistic. And it's like, he's even got the wound things. We don't even know what the wound things do, but we love those.
It's a reference. I understood that reference.
Yes,
I understood that one.
Yeah. I think as well. I think I cannot sort of speak enough about the importance of that final scene. Particularly now when the future of the show seems a bit trepidatious or a bit murky. That scene of William Hartnell almost looking into the future and in the original cut seeing Matt Smith's Doctor and, you know, and then obviously the 60th anniversary version, we see Shooty there, which I think is so wonderful as well. It just speaks to sort of the hope of the future, and it also speaks to sort of like William Hartnell's just love for and dedication for the show, which I think just has carried on in every Doctor since. And us as fans, the show means so much to us, You know, the amount of times I've cried watching this show, the amount of times I've laughed or felt angry or felt something. It's such an important, massive part of my life that scene just, with its sort of quiet, there's no dialogue. It's just, you know, William Hartnell looking up to Matt Screen on a on a green screen, or, you know, Shooty being put there, and then Mark Gatiss' hands going on the console, and but it just speaks volumes, doesn't it, about what Doctor Who is. It's a show, it's a legacy, it's hope, it's something which goes on and never ends.
Yes, definitely.
It is so simplistic, but for it to sort of capstone the fact that, like, you're looking at the development of the series, year one, all the way to the time, the 50th anniversary, and the Doctor that represents that, and just bringing those 2 points together, it's a great cameo, and it doesn't take away from any of the rest of the episode. It doesn't feel like they suddenly steal the show, and that's the only thing people remember, because the rest of the performance is just carry that story, which is, it's wonderful. Really is.
Yeah, really, really well put as well from you both. And one thing I noticed when rewatching this recently was how, despite no matter where Doctor Who is, whether it's right at the start or when it's coming back in 2005 or when it's going into a new era with Disney, Doctor Who always has a lot going against it, but it always ends up coming back out on top, which, you know, does kind of make me feel better about, you know, future things for the show, because a lot of the stuff that we see here, like, for example, when Jack and you as well, Robin, bringing up about the like the TARDIS set as well, and that how they had to fight to get that set built. And then recently, with the 20-year anniversary special of New Who, Russell was speaking about how they had to kind of, like, you know, push to get things done, and how tight the shoots were for the filming of the first season. It's just kind of like, you know, despite the show having such a huge legacy, you know, a 60+ year legacy, it's always going to have kind of the troubles that, like, a show that was just starting out will have, which is really interesting, I think. But
I think it's good in certain circumstances for Doctor Who as well, because I think it stops people from sort of resting on laurels and being lazy about things. They're forced to constantly be on their toes, which I think is really good for a show like Doctor Who. I think the second Doctor Who starts becoming just paint by numbers, for lack of a better term, or it's just, you know, sort of just like, oh, just do this, and it's just put like that. It has to have that thought, that fire behind it.
Yeah, and I feel like a show like Doctor Who, which is dependent on change, whether that's in front of the camera or behind the camera, because, you know, the show has changed so many times over the years. So many faces have come and gone and returned. But it's nice to know that there is that fire no matter what, even during the wilderness years, that there's so many creative minds that will fight to keep that show in people's minds, whether that be releasing audio dramas, books, magazines, comics, etc. So many different mediums, especially in, like, today's times as well. Even before the current situation that we're in with Doctor Who, like, people doing fan films, fan audios, and it's just really cool seeing how people interpret Doctor Who and how they would play the Doctor or describe the Doctor, or where they take their Doctor. It's really cool, and I feel like that's something that I really do admire greatly about the fans out there, definitely. So, yeah, is there anything that you two would like to add to An Adventure in Space and Time before we move on to the main course?
Only that I think we just hit it on the head, just with just how exceptional the acting is for everyone's parts in it, and how it was just another sort of capstone thing to get on the 50th. Like, they could have saved it for like another year, for another anniversary, but the fact that, like, no, this is 50 years, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you a multi-Doctor story, we're going to apparently do some mini-sodes, which was new to me, but no.
Robin, did you watch The Science of Doctor Who today? That's what you're supposed to watch. The Science of Doctor Who with with Professor Brian Cox, talking about how the TARDIS could be possible in this universe. And did you not watch that? That was on the homework, Robin.
Give me a couple of minutes. I'll be right back.
I think the only thing I'd add to it is that I kind of wish, in a way, we'd had like a sort of spiritual sequel to it with the 60th, maybe focusing on either it be them bringing the show back in 2005, or even I think the ideal one I would have really loved would have been like an idea of I think it's like Tom Baker's final year as the Doctor and him wrestling with having been the Doctor for 7 years, then making the decision to give that up. I think that could have been a really interesting sort of docudrama. Again, his time as the Doctor, because he, whether you like it or not, he is that long scarf is what follows every Doctor around. Is that long scarf, and it's people look up and will always point to Tom Baker as being the Doctor. So I think it would be very cool to have that. Maybe in future years we'll see that sort of thing. Who knows? But
yeah, maybe. I think one. I mean, I don't think this will get enough general public, interest. But maybe having a reimagination of the awful night that the VHS, not VHS, it was the film tapes were destroyed, so we get to see Marco Polo getting destroyed or something.
It's funny you say that. Robin was talking about finding a lost episode of Doctor Who earlier. Robin, could you have a look around your flat? Maybe you got a copy of Marco Polo somewhere. You just using it as a drinks coaster or something.
I was literally about to say my tea coaster, but you beat me to it.
or just using it as a frisbee or something,
Yeah, I was using like the bits like you sort of pull out of it to like sort of floss my teeth with.
Yeah.
I thought of one more thing, if you don't mind me, Jack.
Please.
We had the Five-ish Doctors reboot.
Yes, we did. Yes. Now the Five-ish Doctors. Jack, since you brought it up, would you like to explain?
I'm sure, Rob. So the Five-ish Doctors reboot is a sort of. It's like a mockumentary style sort of drama, in a way, which is it's like a fan film directed and written by Peter Davison.
Yeah,
basically talking about why the classic Doctors aren't featured in Day of the Doctor, essentially, and it's very funny. You have a lot of people who cameo in it who just did it for sort of goodwill alone. It's wonderfully funny. That's where you get the gif of Colin Baker going, even more of me, which is so fantastic. Ian McKellen and Peter Jackson appear on the set of The Hobbit in it as well. It's really, really cool. And it all culminates with Peter Davison, Colin Baker, and Sylvester McCoy sneaking around the Doctor Who experience and sneaking onto the set of Day of the Doctor because David Tennant's left the door open for him to sneak in. It's so wonderfully brilliant. It has a really funny sort of version of RTD playing himself in one part of it. Stephen Moffat plays a very funny version of himself as well. It's just wonderful. It really, really is.
Yeah, it really is, and it kind of, I think I remember being at the time slightly disappointed that we didn't see classic Doctors return, but I feel like this acts as kind of like a good little replacement as well, because whilst they're not playing the Doctor, I feel like with a lot of the actors who play the Doctor anyway, there's a lot of themselves that are present in the incarnation that they're playing anyway. So having Colin Baker, Peter Davison, Sylvester McCoy, seeing Paul McGann all interact with each other, it's kind of just like watching like a multi-Doctor story anyway, to be fair, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Robert.
Sorry, it's such a love letter to fans as well. Like you have references to Peter Davison's regeneration, with all of his companions going around and then Janet Fielding just sort of like, wake up, they're not going to call you, which is so brilliant. And little things like as well, like I think like there's a really funny bit where Peter's sort of like in a dreamscape walking through where Matt Smith's like, oh, it's so great to have you here. Jenna Coleman's like, you're my favorite, of all the doctors. And then it is just such a funny, it's a love letter to fans. There's all those little references. It's wonderful. Robin, I'm hoping you've watched it at some point. If not, you need to.
No, I do remember watching that one, and I think that's one that I definitely need to rewatch, especially with my hindsight for now recognizing a lot of those doctors and being more experienced with them. I think I can go back and appreciate a lot more of those references. I remember it being good fun when I first watched it, and I could definitely tell that they were all having a good time, a good laugh. But thank you for reminding me about that one. That was one that I missed for my homework today, so I'll watch that after we finish recording this.
Oh, definitely.
Lovely stuff. Yes.
I swear, it's the last thing I'll say about the 5 Doctors. I love as well that they have the joke that, because it's like a take on the 5 Doctors as well, they have the joke that Tom Baker's like stuck in a time scoop. Again, he just doesn't, because he obviously appears in Day of the Doctor. So it's just a very funny little joke that like Peter Davison like tries to call him at one point to see if he's been asked to be on the show. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm stuck in a time scoop. I feel like I've done this sort of thing before.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, and those Easter eggs and references really do reward fans that have watched a lot of Classic Who as well, which I thought was really nice. And again, just gets better the more that you rewatch it after watching a lot of Doctor Who's classic stuff. Now, it is time for the main course. So, let's start with the opening of Day of the Doctor, which is a little bit reminiscent to how the show began in 1963 as we return to the Coal Hill School. And I think this is the first time in the show that it is revealed that Clara is actually working there, which I thought was really interesting. Now, when you saw that little recreation of the classic Doctor Who title sequence, Robin, what did you think when you watched that recently?
Like I can still remember this first time I watched it all those years ago, and first time I watched it all those years ago, and rewatching it now, just instantly being excited, the biggest grin on my face. When I watched this with my parents the first time it aired, they got really nostalgic because that's the Doctor Who opening they saw on TV when they were younger. And for me, rewatching it now, like I could remember them doing something with the junkyard. I forgot it was at the very beginning. So when it was first of all that with the classic black and white, I was like, oh, this is good. This is a brilliant way of throwing back the fact that 50-year anniversary, and just like, yeah, just it put a smile straight to my face.
Nice. That's really, really nice to hear as well, about how happy it made you feel seeing that all being tied together. Jack, how did that opening sequence make you feel?
Oh, every time I see it, I have this just sort of warm feeling
Yeah.
in my heart. It feels like Saturday afternoon, your tea in front of you, watching it. Whether you saw Classic or not, it was going out. I certainly didn't. I knew you did either. But by this point, I'd seen things like An Unearthly Child, so it was very, very cool for me. I watch it now, and I've watched a lot of Classic Who at the BFI, which is really, and that's a wonderful experience I recommend to anybody. So it's seeing that sort of opening and like the recreation almost of the shot. So you have the policeman, which appears like An Unearthly Child. You just feel the love dripping off this episode, which is, I think it really, Doctor Who at the minute gets a lot of bash for touching its legacy. I think it's done so overtly in this, but really respectfully. So
Okay, that I think that's one way of describing this episode, because whilst it is filled with references and returning faces, a lot of this is looking back at the past, but it also does set up a future plot point as well, which I'll be getting onto. But We do finally see the Time War in this episode during the Battle of Arcadia sequence, where we see Daleks and their spaceships flying all over the place, and there's a lot of destruction and death. And yeah, this is like the first time we've had like a proper glimpse of the Time War. Now, Jack, what was it like seeing that Battle of Arcadia sequence for the first time?
Oh, just from the moment they sort of flashed back to it, it was like, and I didn't think they'd go into it fully. I was like, I didn't really know what I expected would happen. I remember turning to my wife and going, "Oh my god, it's the Time War! It's they're going into it. This is because again, it had been built up and mythologized so much in those 8 years in between. So to actually like not only to go into it, but to be going into the very last day of it, was like this is something. And again, to have the confirmation that this sort of unknown doctor, which we by this we learn is the War Doctor, and that sort of iconic step in like, soldier, I'm gonna need your gun, and
yeah,
no more on the, it's just it is just the meme goes around now, but it is literally cinema.
Yeah,
it?
It is cinema. Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolute content, as would be the more modern one. But, Robin, so you've obviously seen the episode recently as well. Do you feel like that battle sequence has aged well in terms of special effects and the scope that it had for the TV budget?
Yeah, definitely. Like the fact that they keep coming back to it for various shots, and you don't need to spend too long, but it's clearly quite a big set, and there's a lot of stuff going on. Like to finally have some context for the Time War, something that we've been kind of given little tiny teaspoons of throughout the series, and being like, "Oh, please, sir, can we have some more?" And now to finally get it on this full scale, to see John Hurt be not only awesome with that line about having the gun, but I love that moment when the TARDIS smashes through the wall, cleans in half a Dalek, and I'm like, whoa! I forgot that, and I got really hyped when I rewatched it today. I was just like, yeah, cut that Dalek in half. So that made me happy.
It made me it made me really think. So I was like, not only did I think, oh, that's metal, but I was also like, when I watched this little snippet of it today, I was like, oh, I miss those guys. I miss me some Daleks.
The Daleks are way overdue a return, and I feel like I'm going off slightly on a tangent here, but I think it was Stephen Moffat that said in an interview whilst he was showrunner that whilst the Daleks aren't contracted to be on the show on a yearly basis or whenever a season is released, for younger audience members or children, going a year without the show anyway feels like a lifetime, but having a year where the Daleks aren't on there feels even longer because they're kind of like the bread and butter of the show. Whilst they're not in every episode, the Daleks go hand in hand with the show, or hand and plunger, should I say? But it's certainly true that they are really vital to the show's DNA, which I think definitely something that I do agree. I do miss my Pepper Potts. But anyway, the Time War had a lot going on, and we saw the Battle of Arcadia, which was absolutely fantastic. But the War Doctor goes on a little journey to a barnyard, which does end up getting some much needed context later on in the Moffat era. But we do see another returning face here, but it's not who we think she is. No, Billie Piper isn't playing Rose. She isn't playing the Doctor, at least not yet.
Wait, what?
But she is playing the Moment, and the Moment is essentially that they're this sentient self-destruct button. So self-destruct button with a conscience. And it was, from what I recall, when it was announced that Billie Piper was returning, I think there was a little bit of misdirect where it was said that she was returning as Rose. And I remember originally feeling a little bit disappointed because I always wanted Rose to return, even though now looking back, I'm like, okay, that's kind of done. It would be stupid to bring back Billie Piper for no reason. But but seeing the moment being such a different version compared to Rose and the Bad Wolf entity, Jack, what was it like seeing the moment for the first time?
I was already sort of like, because we have the line about the general says about how he's supposed to use a weapon that judges you, which is such a beautiful line, and I love how high concept the idea of the moment is. That it's this ultimate nullifier, but it will judge you in your decision, and she even says that, if you do this, your punishment is that you survive. And it's like, oh wow, that's for a character like the Doctor. He even says he just wants the war to end. He wants to be done. So she says, okay, that's it then. You're gonna live. And that's so sort of powerful. So I felt a little misdirect, and I remember thinking that, oh, this is gonna be like the 5 Doctors or the 3 Doctors. We're just gonna pick the 10th Doctor and Rose up from somewhere in series 2, and that's how they're going to be used in this series. But no, or in this special. But no, and I really loved sort of Billie's portrayal as this is one of those ones that made me go, oh, obviously Billie is fantastic as Rose, but Billie's the real deal.
Yeah, she's a great actress,
amazing actress, and seeing her do this and just these little bits, she's mocking the Doctor, like,
I love that, yeah.
And didn't you want her to see you? The TARDIS. And it's there's just some really beautiful dialogue there, and again, I think it's so well constructed, this idea of the moment, and that being the device which leads to the multi-Doctor stuff to happen. And for it to be the theme going through that, this is the War Doctor seeing future versions of himself who are wrestling with the guilt or trying their best to move on from what he does this day. I think it's wonderful. It really, really is. I think it's a brilliant use of Billie. Yeah,
it certainly is. Yeah.
What I love about bringing Billie back is it really did subvert our audience expectations. To be able to see her on the screen again and being like, "Oh, it's Billie Piper," and then it being like, "Oh, it's not Rose. Oh, it's someone completely different." But she's just such a wonderful actress that she's able to play such a brilliant, interesting, very Doctor and very many qualities like character, the way they talk, which is interesting to say the least, given certain things that happened. And more interestingly is one of her lines where she says she's talking about like the form that she's taken on, and she's like questioning if she's Rose before she says, "Oh, in this form," pauses, and then we know that she goes on to say like Bad Wolf. But it's interesting that now, with the whole context of everything else, that in this form line could now refer to what Billie Piper is now coming back as, which it's obviously they're not intended for that all those years ago. But I just find that very interesting that you can now very much add to the canon of these things and just be like, you know what? Why not? You can throw that in there. That's an extra depth to that little moment, which is fun.
Yeah. It's also the fact, I think she says, as well as that, which you're absolutely right about, Robin, she also says, I choose this face because I think it'd be pleasing to you. It's either from your past or from your future.
Exactly.
I always get those mixed up. And it's like, oh, yeah, okay. It could be, that, and obviously the Bad Wolf energy is very reminiscent of sort of regeneration anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have that extra context to it now, that we can apply to it, which is very cool in a way.
Yeah, certainly, and obviously, time can only be the tell of where this story goes, whether it's 16th Doctor or the insert subtitle here, Doctor, or Bad Wolf Entity, or the TARDIS, or whoever at this point. Billie Piper's just playing herself, maybe, because, you know, just introducing Billie Piper. Who knows? But,
Coming at you.
yeah, who knows? But going back to the episode itself, because, yeah, we're introduced to the moment, and then things pick up in the present day again with the art gallery being attacked, and it's alluded that someone or something is breaking through the paintings. But before the Doctor can focus on what's going on in the present day, a wormhole opens up, and he travels to the other side, and he is greeted, one way to put it, by another returning face, the one and only David Tennant. Imagine him returning to the show. It seems like such a rarity, but
I know that, and I know people, you know, I think in some circumstances very rightly sort of, you know, go against like his return as the 14th Doctor. I think that still works. I think, you know, obviously you can make an argument with more recent things that it could be tarnished a bit, but I think it works in that sense. But you have to remember at the time, he'd not come back to Doctor Who since doing The End of Time. He'd not done Big Finish or anything like that. So this was massive for so many of us that after 3 years, we had our Doctor come back to it. Not to say any of us didn't love Matt Smith. You know, I know a lot of people did, you know, did end the show with David, unfortunately, which is, hey, that people did that, they did that, but I think it's a bit silly personally. So it was really, really something to see him back with the incumbent Doctor, to have that time with him. So yeah, I can't, you know, people won't really, I don't think people really would understand how sort of special it was that time now. I say that. I think maybe people could understand with like Jodie popping up in the Reality War, who Jodie was a Doctor. I think maybe they could appreciate it at the same level there. It was the same sort of thing back then, but just knowing he was back for an entire special was, oh my God. Although whatever they did to his hair until those last few scenes, I don't understand. But hey.
Yeah, I think it was weird because wasn't he doing a Shakespeare play as well at the time?
Was he? I don't know.
I think so. Yeah.
All I know is until he finally gets to that scene back on the Gallifrey in the barn, his hair is wrong. Like,
it's just so.
It's like, what is this? Like, this isn't the 10th Doctor.
I mean, that's definitely one of my little criticisms for the episode. It's like the hair, just why? Because everything else is really cool. And one thing, and this seems so small in comparison to the amazing things that happen in this episode, but I am so glad that they actually brought back the coral themed console as well. Which I think they filmed on the Doctor Experience.
Yeah, they did. I think they had it for like half a day or something. They had to do those little bits. Like,
but it's just so cool seeing it back because it also brings back like that gloomy feel that it had as well when it was first introduced, which I thought was really nice. But yeah, seeing David Tennant return was certainly a treat back then. Seeing a Doctor from especially the eyes of the general public as well, you know, who absolutely loved David Tennant as the Doctor. Seeing him return and his chemistry as well with Matt was absolutely fantastic. It was kind of like siblings, really. You know, it's constantly, you know, bantering with each other, which I thought was really, really nice. Now, obviously, the plot is a little bit timey-wimey, but overall, Robin, do you feel like the plot, especially how non-linear it is, do you feel like that it flows well?
Honestly, I think the pacing for this is fantastic. Like, obviously, this is a longer episode. We get
Yeah.
like an extra half an hour of content compared to what we usually get for an episode of
Yeah.
Doctor Who. And I think that half an hour is used fantastically. We get this build up of the stuff in the museum, we get introductions to each of these doctors, making them distinct. And I think one of the brilliance of this story is not only do we get a returning villain of Doctor Who, of the Zygons,
Yeah.
but I think they do the correct choice of making them kind of take a backstage to the plot. They're not
Yeah.
full front and center. It's more focused on these doctors, on the side characters, and
Yeah.
their relationships with one another. This history of this war doctor and what they're going for. Like, clearly they had John Hurt and they were going to use him as much as they could, which
Yeah.
smart choice. Why the hell would you not? But I think by having the story first and foremost focus on the doctors, their history with one another, this ongoing conflict that not only has been brought up in the past with the Time War, but also like them being able to rectify things and say things and it being so triumphant. It doesn't end on a sad note. We end on like a yes moment, just want to clutch your fists and stand up, scream and holler and hoot. But I think they did just a real right choice in that. And I think it just
Yeah.
makes the whole experience like, it's very much a comfort episode. You could just stick on, you could
Yeah.
just smile from start to finish and yeah, just love it. Marvelous, marvelous.
Yeah,
Um,
it is certainly no, it is certainly marvelous, marvelous, and yeah, Robin, you are right as well that it is what could be seen as a very character-driven narrative as well, and for like 90 minutes, that's certainly some feat to do. That's certainly an accomplishment, whilst also having like a clear set and clear objective as well. But it does focus primarily on its characters and the journey from the Time War to the Doctors actually saving Gallifrey, which contradicts what we previously learned. And obviously, that is dealt with towards the end of the episode where, the timelines are out of sync. So anyone before Matt Smith won't remember that. Now, Jack, I'm going to throw this question to you. Obviously, that changes the canon. Doctor Who never does that. Do you feel that takes away from what we had prior to this episode, obviously with the Doctor's journey, or do you feel like it adds to it, or do you feel like it just doesn't
I
change
think it
anything?
absolutely adds to it
Yeah.
because certainly in terms of the destruction of Gallifrey, it keeps that plot point for the Ninth Doctor and the 10th Doctor, that guilt, that weight of being the last of the Time Lords, it keeps it intact for them.
Yeah.
Because at least in their mind, it's what they believe to be the case, and it also lends to what at the time I felt was going to be this brand new era of Doctor Who where he's not shackled by the burden of being the last of the Time Lords anymore. We're going to see, hopefully not so many overt references to Gallifrey and returns from it as we might have done in classic Who and stuff, but certainly something. And, that's, I'm not going to get into really, what happens after that, but I was excited for the prospect of having the Gallifrey back. I was. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a really good answer as well, because because the whole explanation with the timelines being out of sync, it does preserve the context that Gallifrey was destroyed from the Doctor's perspective, which it doesn't make everything that happened before completely pointless or whatever, because obviously because of the Doctor's grief and the Doctor believed strongly that they were the reason why Gallifrey was no longer there and that they pushed the button. It allows, all that stuff where Rose essentially healed the Doctor and, as the Doctor regenerates, the Doctor slowly begins to move on from that. And that is still all intact, which, because of the sci-fi shenanigans, it works really well. But I'm going to throw the same question to you, Robin, as well. Do you feel like that more positive, upbeat end about Gallifrey surviving, do you feel like that takes away from what happened prior, or do you feel like it adds to it?
Honestly, I think it adds to it. I really do, because I think because of, let's face it, they pull out some timey-wimey nonsense about them forgetting stuff, meeting up. They've got to do that because timelines. We get it. At this point, we
Yeah.
hand wave that. We're like, okay, there's gonna be a reason. They have to reverse the polarity, although they actually do say that in this, so they get away with it. But I think it really does add to it because we still get, as Jack has said, the points of these particular doctors, their story threads, feeling as if they're alone, feeling as if they have that kind of that sadness to them. And I think it honestly, it ended on a triumphant note. I think really adds to the 50th. I think you could have still told a really compelling story with a sad ending or a bittersweet one. But I think when it
Yeah.
comes to the 50th, you need something triumphant. If you're going to have all the doctors coming in, then that needs to be a triumphant. I think if it wasn't, it didn't have the same impact. I could be completely wrong. Someone could write up a completely different story to that and prove me wrong completely. And obviously stuff with Gallifrey has changed, and a lot of people have their own different opinions on that. Personally, I really hate it because I prefer the more positive aspect of them being kept in this painting, but difference of
Yeah.
opinions and everything.
Yeah.
I think for this, just the fact that it is the 50th anniversary, it's something grand. It keeps them alive, but it also puts them in this pocket dimension where it's like they're not just going to be meeting the doctor on a bi-weekly basis, being like asking for a cup of sugar from their neighbor or something. No, they're very happily pushed away to one side where it's like it's okay. They're over here, so they can't interfere with any other plots.
Yeah.
So I liked it.
No, that's good. That's great to hear. And again, I completely agree with you as well. Um, without getting into too much detail about what happens after with Gallifrey, but I feel like from that point on, it's like, okay, the Doctor has a clear um, direction as well, because obviously confronting the past and their journey is now being, pushed in a new direction, which is summed up beautifully by the ending, where Matt Smith and his predecessors are all there, looking at Gallifrey. They're going home the long way around, which I feel like such a beautiful scene as well, because it's like one of the few times where the Doctor actually speaks about his own dreams as well, which I thought was really nice. And it's kind of, like the show being a little bit meta as well, because it's shown audiences like this is the next journey. This is going to be something that, well, at least to those back then, it's like, okay, this is going to be the next 10-year character arc or something. This is going to be the show's destination. He's going to find Gallifrey and he's going to start to heal from this, which I thought was really, really nice. But as we start to look towards ending this discussion about Day of the Doctor, obviously the show recently has certainly dived into nostalgia in ways that have certainly gotten criticism from fans and the general public alike. Do you feel like there's anything to be learned from Day of the Doctor in terms of how the show should be handled in the future?
Oh,
Whether that be plot points or the way to bring back characters whilst not depending on prior knowledge too much,
yeah, I think that's definitely a strength there. I do think it's what really works about the Doctor is it's very much it's another take on the Three Doctors. It's
Yeah.
the Three Doctors is the prototype of, I think, a lot of crossover stories, because whether you like it or not, whether it is this, whether technically it's the same show, different eras of the show are in a way different shows.
Yeah.
So when we have a multi-Doctor story, it does feel like it feels like a crossover episode.
Yeah.
So to have that, and again, the blueprint for that being the Three Doctors, this is very much the spiritual successor to that, even down to having, three doctors who appear who start off sort of disliking each other, and you have the, oh, you've redecorated, I don't like it, joke, obviously, you have the older Doctor who's technically the youngest one of them, who's being all the grumpy granddad. You have the dandy and the clown. It's all very much there. I think going forward, in terms of looking at the future, it's really tough not to talk more about the Gallifrey thing, because I just feel like there's, and again, I don't want to speak ill of another era that's come and gone, but I feel like there's potential that could have been there and could have been tapped in a way which we didn't get, personally. So, yeah, I think looking forward, that if we ever got another multi-doctor story, this is what you need to look at again.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of, in terms of getting people back, it's it becomes more difficult now, because obviously, certainly Shooty, I don't think is going to be coming back to the show anytime soon, because he's bound for Hollywood stardom, essentially. And Jodie might come back, because we've just seen her come back. It'd be great. David's probably just around the corner waiting for the phone call. He's like the modern Patrick Troughton, who just came back because he loved it so much. So yeah, I think there's lessons to be learned from Day of the Doctor, but also there is, again, it's the blueprint to follow, I think, for how we do things.
I think calling it a blueprint is a perfect way to take about this episode. Like, I think the fact that it's a multi-doctor story with a villain that isn't the main focus, that takes up too much screen time. The fact that they're in the backdrop, they're definitely the threat, but it's enough of a threat to remind you they're there, but also keep the focus on establishing these characters, their relationships with one another, their relationships with other companions. Like, we didn't get the chance to bring it up, but I really loved just the very small scene of Clara talking to John Hurt's doctor, and it's just to give him a very calm scene. I thought was really lovely to see the doctor a little bit more human, like a bit more like quite defeated, and that was just really lovely. And I think scenes like that are really important. Definitely an argument with modern Doctor Who about how much fan service is good fan service, and how much of it becomes fan wank. You've got to get that on the scales, because
it's the balance, isn't it? Which I think a lot of stuff recently, I think a good way that was used is like the story in the engine. I think that's a good way of touching on the past. Because let's face it, I think, people are always on about how Doctor Who should be completely brand new and doing completely new things. I agree. I think it should be. But you also have to focus on the fact at certain points that it is this 60 plus year long show. It has this legacy, and it has earned the right to go back and occasionally touch it, or sort of bring the old toys out the shop. But it's about how you do it. It's about doing things which can be accessible to a new audience, things that do service that original portrayal, things that aren't just like the gulp shitto of the week. It's how you do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like say for example, in the future, if there's like a Dalek episode, obviously from the companion's perspective, it's probably going to be the first time that they see a Dalek. So the Doctor, they're going to have to take the opportunity to explain who the Daleks are. You can't just, even though the Daleks are iconic, you can't just start off an episode, they're just, blowing shit up just because, they can. Because whilst that seems cool, obviously the Daleks have their motivations and why they're there, what they're trying to achieve. Is it just pure extermination, or is it because they want to change history or whatever? These sorts of things need to be said and dealt with, so we can see why they're a threat and why the Doctor is so terrified of them. And I feel like that can be applied to Cybermen, the Master, some things that were missing as well, unfortunately, with Irani and Skeletor. I mean Omega. As well. Just kind of without doing like just repeating lines of dialogue, but just simple like character emotions as well, just to really bring in the threat. Like, one thing that I found that worked really well recently in the season just gone was The Well, which was the sequel to Midnight, which was a perfect example of using an older episode but building upon it, kind of being the aliens to Alien. Which I thought was really good.
Really good. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think as well, it's about Oh god, I've lost my train of thought now. But I was like, it's about. I suppose you were saying there about how it could be a companion's first episode of the Daleks, but it could be an audience member's first episode
Yeah.
of the Daleks as well. And I think Doctor Who really shines, particularly in New Who, when the companion sort of is the audience's eyes
Yeah.
to the world.
Yeah.
So I think that going forward, I think if that's how stuff should be treated, as opposed to just, oh, this is you remember this thing from
Yeah.
50 years ago, and then casual audience member watching on Saturday nights going, what? I don't. What? I don't know this. I think I think it's not so much the quantity of stuff; it's the quality of how we want it to be.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't want to wish it into existence, but say if they did a season where they were more dependent on returnees, like whether that be reused locations or monsters, villains, companions, or whatever. But as long as there's like a clear story, clear reasons for them being there, and obviously for casual audiences, like say for example the Daleks as well, they haven't been on TV since 2022, and even then in that episode they're just kind of like, oh yeah, here's the Daleks, they're here to help the Master, but we haven't had like a like a proper Dalek story for even longer than that. So just to give the audience that refresh, that will help them understand why they're there for sure.
I think there's ways you can do it. I mean, we have to look at Classic Who and how like season 20 of that is essentially the let's bring out the old hits, let's touch, and I think a lot of that works, a lot of it doesn't. But I think there's way you can do it and make it work. And certainly putting a through line through the series could really help. Things, I think you could have a Dalek episode and a Cyberman episode and then a Master episode. I think you could do those things and have it work without it being just, oh, here we go. They're bringing out all the old stuff just to make the 50-year-olds who still watch Doctor Who, happy. No, I think there's a way you could do it. And it probably doesn't look like how it's been used in the past two series, but hey.
Yeah. That's completely fair. Robin, is there anything else you'd like to add on to that before?
No, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm just copying homework, but I think honestly the both of you really hit the nails on the heads with those points that you're bringing up. I think one other thing to sort of consider whenever you're writing a narrative, whenever you're coming up with a story for Doctor Who, is to think of, okay, what timeline are we using? What monster are we using? Does that timeline and that monster warrants them to be the focus of the story? And so anything with the Doctor and the like should be more sort of foreground? Should it be 50-50? Or should it be something like this story with the Day of the Doctor, where the threat is very much in the background, so we can focus more on the narrative and the characters? I think going forward, if you want to bring back returning companions, which I think that's always wonderful. I'm never going to be sick of that. Even me, who's like less familiar with a lot of companions, there's always that joy of seeing them on screen and other people getting that high, and you kind of absorb some of that excitement from them, and you're like, oh, you're happy, so I'm happy. But I think that is always fun. I think returning monsters is fun, and I think we've brought it up already. I think as long as you can get those white ingredients in the pot, you're not just going to so I'm just about to just. I was trying to think of like a reference, but my head just went to like Powerpuff Girls with like the swallow of the pot before smashing into too much fan service, and it's just leaking into it. It's like no. But yeah, I think there is a place for it. I think there is ways of continuing this narrative. Like we've had David Tennant come back. We've had Beat the Motherfucking Meat from Big Finish show up in our Doctor Who TV, which is amazing. And I would love
he's got a tattoo. He's got a tattoo.
Oh,
there we go.
Look! Oh my god!
Yeah.
Oh,
what one of the best things I have ever invested, and also the recently announced character options as well.
Yes. Oh,
I am so looking forward to that. But honestly, it has been an absolute delight to have you both on here, Jack and Robin. Thank you so much for talking about the 50th anniversary year, Day of the Doctor, An Adventure in Space and Time, Night of the Doctor, The Last Day, The Five-ish Doctors. So many cool things that we got that year. It has been a delight to look back on all of that and talk about, that anniversary year. But for those who are listening or watching this podcast, where can they find your content?
Oh, well, they can find an awful lot of our stuff on the An Awful Lot of Running YouTube channel, as well as it being on Spotify and anywhere you get your podcast. An Awful Lot of Running is the podcast that Rob and I co-run. And sort of it is, like you described at the very beginning there, it's very much me sort of trundling him through time and space, often kicking and screaming, and just sort of, we have different discussions. We have our D&D show, which it's been so much fun, which has been Robin's baby, and he's done so much with it. There's Battles in Fandom, which is our debate show, which is a lot of fun as well. And we're currently sort of had a bit of a hiatus, a bit of a pause before we come back with our brand new and bold season 2, which should be a lot of fun. But I mean, you can find me on Twitter and most social media platforms as An_awful_Jack. And Robin's a published author, so he's got a book called The Last Human.
Yes,
Ooh.
that's correct. Available on Amazon for those of you who have enjoyed my words and thought, hey, you know what? He's quite a charismatic person, maybe a bit charismatic in his writing. And even if you didn't think that, please be nice. Maybe give like a couple of copies and read this book of mine. It's a passion of mine. I'd love to be an actual published author, like on shelves, but we'll see. But thank you so much for having us, Jack. It's been phenomenal being on this show. It really has.
And for those who have been listening or watching the podcast, thank you very much for tuning in. And I will see you all next time. Goodbye for now.